So the title of my talk is Data-Informed Decision-Making in a Pandemic, which is the title of the online course that we created and will be freely available in a few weeks, hopefully. We're still working on some didactic details and making it a little bit more smooth for the potential users. And subtitle is Communicating Research Through Interaction, because the original idea was not to create, or the original motivation was not to create an online course. So the original motivation was something different. As I said, we founded the COVID-19 working group at FENStatS, which was, I think, in May or June 2020. I don't know exactly how it happened, but I was chair of that working group. So the first idea was to collect information, to collect best practices, how COVID-19 with respect to data and data analysis. I see my internet connection is in, so if there's a problem, please let me know. Just talk to me, and a hotspot on my mobile because I'm somewhere else, and that it will work anyway. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, decision makers in politics and business were obviously in trouble. Maybe not all of them knew, but they were definitely in trouble because many interests had to be weighed against each other, and some of the interests were in conflict of different stakeholders. Let's talk economy, education, whatever, and not even all of those interests were not aware of those conflicting interests. So the goal was to that would minimize the damage in all areas of public and private life. Support decisions, data were used, and sometimes even insights from data. Not always there were real insights, but data were used, data that were available, data that got available later. And FENStatS, the COVID-19 working group, collected best practices from Europe and also the rest of the world. Did a great job also on this and collected lots of very interesting material. And then we had all that material, we had ordered it on our website, but the question was, so the can we do with it, which is another paper, please. So we developed the idea to create an online course, an interactive online course that addressed political decision makers, but also managers, the general public, and so on, and allowed the users to explore how exactly data are made and what the limitations of using data in such a complex decision-making situations truly are. So we wanted to show how data can be used to improve and support decision-making, not only on best practices, but also with recommendations that we developed and that we had not found anywhere so far. And we also wanted to show the principles and the opportunities and limitations of data-based decision-making or data-informed decision-making. So the target groups are politicians. Hopefully some of them will have, of course, journalists, data journalists, and also health journalists, managing directors, and the general public. The course follows also certain structure because when we decided to make a course, we also, of course, needed someone who would help us with creating such an online course. We experts in this, and we had limited time, and we also needed a place where we could host the course. We could find someone who would do marketing. So it should have a platform where lots of people already had access, or where other people would look for maybe a course like that, or at least a course on data-informed decision-making and data literacy. So what we found was that we had the connection to the Stifterverband, the German Stifterverband, Association of Foundations, Scientific Foundations, and Hochschule für Digitalisierung. It's a forum for universities focused on digitization, and they're a kind of a think tank or research organization for German universities. And I had worked with the Hochschulforum Digitalisierung for several years and developed the data literacy framework, which raised a lot of interest because it was, at least in the German area, the first well-structured framework for a competence or set of competencies like data literacy, not only focused on technical aspects of data literacy, such like data management, data engineering, data analysis, but also a lot on competencies around. So the connection between non-data experts and data experts. Also had in mind that data literacy should be seen as a future skill. That means it consists of 3 dimensions. It consists of knowledge related to working with data. It includes certain skills and abilities, and it includes values and ethics and attitudes, which is relevant for our society. So at the moment, I'm in an area where I give a lecture on ethics and AI for leaders, for future leaders. So we see that this ethical topic is very, very important for our society, and we wanted to include this into the data literacy. So I want to give you what you can see quite a lot on one slide. Tries to bring everything together. We see a process which defines the competence. We described it as the competence defining process, and it starts within a system, within the real world, which can a scientific discipline, organization, can be a state or a company or whatever, with our objects that are interesting with respect to the question what we want to do with data. And those objects have measurable characteristics. By measuring those characteristics, we get data, and by analyzing that data, we get data products. Then we need to get back during this first half of the process, which we describe as the coding process. We always removed context that was not for the final data product. For example, if you, in the last step, calculate a mean or a median from the raw data, you lose information or you lose context about the raw data, about the distribution. But then the process goes back to data, objects and system, back to the real world by adding context. First, results need to be interpreted, data needs to be interpreted, and actions need to be derived. And this was the competence defining process, or the 6 steps or groups of competencies that we wanted to reflect in the online course. So we wanted to show how this complete process of creating value from data, creating knowledge or better decisions from data could be structured and could be demonstrated in the situation of a pandemic with all its challenges that need to be completed. So I would like to come to the online course, to the structure and the content. The online course itself is divided into 8 chapters. So there is also an additional chapter on the introduction and an additional closing chapter, plus the 6 chapters reflecting the 6 competence blocks or competence steps of the competence defining process or of the framework. This course is designed to be implemented into a learning momentum, so it's integrated into an existing platform with lots of other courses related to artificial intelligence and also to data literacy. Each chapter contains an introduction and various learning units. So these are the smaller elements of the chapter. Within each learning unit, there are content elements, which are the tiniest part that can be in this online course. And the learning unit, the content themselves, they contain background information and all related exercises. So this is fixed structure that you can find in each of the chapters and that we followed. The content course we start with an introduction. The introduction tries to create the awareness that data and information must always be embedded in a context. Second chapter is on establishing a data culture. That means it needs to be planned which information and which data is important. as well as planning what can be left out. If you look at the pandemic, that needs to be taken at the beginning. The decision, what is pandemic management? Does pandemic management only include management of health issues, of health aspects? And furthermore, is it only limited to health aspects directly related to the pandemic, like incidences, hospital admissions, and deaths? Or can it be seen, or should it also include indirect health effects, such as infections with other viruses because your system is not trained when you stay at home? Does it include aspects of the economic system? Does it include aspects of education? Does it include psychosocial aspects? Because depending on what you decide, what needs to be managed, you decide which type of data you need and in which quality, in which frequency you need the data. Because there's this old saying, you cannot manage what you don't measure, but if you don't have an certain aspect in mind, you will to measure it and therefore not be able to manage it. And this could have lots of unintended consequences. So the next question is, provide the data. How can the necessary data be collected and managed, and which are different ways to do so that can be explored, and maybe some of them are more realistic than others, but this chapter deals with a certain disadvantages of providing the respective data that are needed for managing a pandemic. Fourth chapter is exploiting data. How can this data be analyzed? How can it be, how can useful data be generated and be transformed, for example, into indicators and into models and into forecasts? And how can visualizations be interpreted correctly? And how can we avoid the misuse of visualizations? Because we all have seen lots of misleading visualizations during the last 2 years now that give us, for example, they give the impression that we have a certainty in our forecast. Definitely not given, because it lacks of confidence intervals or forecasting intervals. Fifth chapter is, now we go back to the interpretation of the results, back to the real, how to interpret the data product, and how this interpretation needs to be distinguished from the facts. So there is a difference between facts and the meaning of facts, or the meaning of data, the interpretation or the meaning that we give to the data. And one of the learning goals of this course is that we create awareness, what is in the data, not what is added, because we start interpreting the results in the data. Get to the next step, interpreting data. We evaluate the relevance and reliability of our data. For example, we ask ourselves, is it biased? Is it representative? Is it time lagged? And so on. So because we account its origin and see where potential of misleading data can come from. The next chapter is the last step in the data literacy data in the competence defining. It deals with deriving actions and evaluates the direct and indirect impact of your decisions. And finally, we have a recapitulation that comes to the conclusion that data can support decision makers, but it should not replace them. The course is not named data-based decision making, rather data-informed decision, to strengthen the fact need to take decisions under uncertainty, and that decisions cannot completely be calculated from data. So now I will give you a short insight into preliminary results. These are exemplary text parts that we developed. So for example, you see here a formal introduction to statistical indicators. This part explains what a statistical indicator is, what its purposes or functions are, and that they can serve as a bridge between users of statistics, so they are means of communication, and then more focused on the specific situation in the context of COVID-19. hand side, we get from data to statistical indicators. So what is the connection between raw data and a statistical indicator? So with a small graphics or graph. Yeah. Here's an example for a quiz. So this is quite simple. It's or multiple choice. You just click on what you think is the correct and get a point for it. So you can collect points during this course. And here the question is, what should we keep in mind when we look at an indicator? The more popular an indicator is, the more reliable it is. Well, it looks like this could have been true during the pandemic, but from a scientific point of view, of course, it is not. Not question validity, or we should think about its limitations. So I think the answer is clear here. It's option number 3. And then you can click and check whether your answer was right. Here you see an exemplary learning unit without the app. This learning unit is about scaling information in a visualization. So it compares data of the pandemic. I think it's about, it's cases in the pandemic. And on the left side, you see it on the original right-hand side, you see logarithmic scale. So this is used to explain the difference and to see what you can do with a certain scale and read from it, or what you cannot read from it. Then here you see different exercises following that text introduction that you can click on, and you see your progress in that lesson during the chapter, and you always retry if it was wrong and have. You can click on show me the solution, and then the solution will. There are also learning units that include an app. If you want to, I can show you one of those interactive apps. They were using rsmo, and this app shows the dependence of indicators that we calculate from positive cases. We see how it depends from certain circumstances or input factors. We can give some input factors like the true reproduction. We can assume a certain reproduction number, and we assume a certain rate of testing, which equals the true prevalence in the population. Of course, we do not know either. Then we assume a sensitivity of the test and the test. The extension rate. This is created to simulate the weather in summer 2020. In the beginning, when we had a few tests available, only symptoms or with close contact to infected persons were tested. But after the summer holiday, at least in Germany, everyone who came back from a holiday tested, mass testing and a test extension. The probability of finding someone who was truly positive in the population that was tested after the mass testing was much slower, was lower than the probability of finding someone who was tested when there were symptoms or who had a contact before, was a contact. So we also model the proportion how it behaves. What you see in the relation is, you see in the bar chart, the proportion of false negatives, false positives, and true positives, and the effect of text extension. And below, in the yellow square, you see, or the yellow table, you see the estimation of the parameters, estimation of reproduction rate, the true reproduction rate from the data we generated by the simulation, and the respective error. The same can we see here for the incidence, and are based on the positive rate. That means we do not estimate the reproduction number from the confirmed cases, but we estimate the number from the change, the fraction of positives, of positive tests. We also have here the number of estimated number of unrecorded cases. And you can play around with apps like that, apps in the course, and get a feeling for the sensitivity of the data that we get from testing different input factors, like the quality of the testing or the testing strategy or changes in the testing strategy. And after such an app, there is also an exercise that I have you learn playing around with those numbers. I said there are two more. One is on the effect of short-time work, the effect of short-time work on the poverty rate, the statistical poverty rate that we have in a society. And the last one is the impact of a lockdown or a certain lockdown strategy. So this is a lockdown efficacy app. We can see it here, and we can also have a comparison of the lockdown strategies that were implemented in different countries. So they are documented here, and you can see so you imagine you are a political decision maker and have to which lockdown actions you want to take, and then you see a simulation what happens with your case. So those were involved in developing that app. Of course, it was FENStatS, the Federation of European Statistical Societies. It was my company, startup, and it was the German AI Campus Learning Platform for Artificial Intelligence, which belongs to Verband, Association of Scientific Foundations, and they gave us a funding for our course. And therefore that we are very, very grateful. And I think the result is, it's amazing. And it's something really, really cool that we developed. And I hope we can reach our goal to present some best practices and some findings from our research that we did at FENStatS to the general public in an innovative way that attract many users. Thanks a lot. And I'm open for your questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Katharina. It was truly interesting to hear a bit more about the course that you've developed together. As I mentioned, feel free to either post your questions in the chat or raise your hand, or ultimately just unmute yourself and ask your questions if you have any. I'll fire away with one that came off the top of my head. Has it been difficult adapting the course so that non-statisticians can understand and ultimately use the information in the course?
Yes, that was difficult. What helped us was that we had developed another course before. The course is Stadtland Datenfluss, which is a popular German game. It's so it was to develop an app for data literacy for the general public. And it also follows this data literacy framework, but it's adapted for adult education. So we did it together with the Center of, with the, how is it called? It's the German Adult Education Association, der Deutsche Volkshochschulverband. It's, by the way, it's the only app that's under the patronage of our former Chancellor, Angela Merkel. So she presented it, and I think she even played it at least a little bit. And this app it's quite gamified, and it was really designed for people who have very little idea about how learning works and what's behind terms like big data, artificial intelligence, or Internet of Things, and also behind some statistical terms. And that helped us a lot, because during the development of that first course, we worked with very experienced developers of learning courses for the general public, for non-statisticians. And that gave us the confidence that we could try it this time. And we had a lot of help from the AI campus, from the people who work there. So they helped us bring it into the learning management system and work on the exercises so that they are easy to understand. But it was a challenge, and lots of people worked on that course, and we had lots of feedback rounds. And yeah, we wanted to complete the course by end of January, and it's still not completed because there are still some topics that are maybe too difficult for non-statisticians. But I'm confident that we will we'll be able to publish it in a few weeks, as I said.
So you mentioned at the beginning that this is directed at politicians and journalists and other people of interest. But how can this education help the statistical community and people working with statistics?
Let me say it this way. When I studied statistics, I learned statistical methods, and I learned also quite a lot about data, maybe more than you learn in most data science classes. But I did not learn how to communicate statistics to non-statisticians. And I think this is a big gap we need to close, because nowadays when we work as statisticians, we do usually work in interdisciplinary teams, and we always work for a certain to answer a certain question, a business question or a scientific research question. And we need to be able to talk to the people from the business side, to the people from the other disciplines. And this is what we do not learn during our studies, during our education. And I really think that we need to teach this to statisticians. And I think a course like this can be helpful to see how can we explain statistical concepts in an easier way without losing too much of the precision that we are used to deal with.
So would you recommend that people working with statistics as statisticians also take this course?
I would recommend that, yeah. And I think it's really a big chance, because what we saw in Germany, statisticians were not asked when it came to political decisions. So there were expert boards, but those expert boards, there were virologists and epidemiologists and economists, but there were no questions. And the question is, of course, everyone can access the course, so it will be free, it's open, and there is no. Maybe you need to register at AI Campus, but it's for free. So there were no statisticians, those expert boards, and there still are no statisticians. And we have lots of discussions, or I see lots of discussions on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, where some, I'd say, hobby statisticians try to analyze data and come to quite, creepy solutions. For example, we found of a psychology professor who correlated the raw numbers of deaths and the numbers of vaccinations and a positive correlation. And then he warned that the vaccination is very dangerous, which is obviously something that you are not allowed to do, because those data both have trends, and they are and you have to eliminate those trends. The time series are not stationary, which is something that statisticians know, or at least should know. But at the moment, when a paper like that is, and there's always someone who picks it up and brings it to a strange blog or whatever, and it's discussed on social media, and then we are in trouble. And the moment we start discussing, then there's always someone who says, okay, if you react like this, and if you argue against like this, something must be of interest. So there must be something with it if so many people argue against it. I mean, logically, that does not make so much sense, but that's how discussions on Twitter go. And that's because we have a lack of statistical education. And that I think this is connected to the way we teach statistics. So it looks like something that is quite theoretical, and it's very difficult and a very strange way of thinking. And I mean, I've been teaching statistics for a long time at different universities. And I often see reactions like, oh, what do I need this for? Oh my God, I hate this. And I will immediately forget this after I've done my thesis. And and that's where the problem is.
So we got one question. I'm an associate professor in epidemiology. Can I access this course? You in part already answered that, but my follow-up would be, where can I access this?
So this is the learning platform of AI Campus. So we can switch between German and English. The course will be in English. This one is the internet address, ki-campus.org. And then the course will be somewhere here under the topics. and search for courses for a class. So I really like that campus because it's on many different other topics as well. So if you click on data, here's the course on data literacy. This is the one that we developed, Stadtland Datenfluss. Here's one, data literacy for elementary schools, or schools work with data, and so on. So if you understand German, this will be easy for you to use, but some of the courses are also in English. And this is the platform where you will find the newly created course.
Excellent. Well, with that, we would like to extend our greatest gratitude. We are very thrilled to have had you with us and explain a bit more about the work that you've been doing with this data literacy course. And we hope that all of you listening in, and all colleagues, of course, also take this course and make sure to spread it around the community, because it can really make a huge impact. Thank you very much, Katharina. It's been a pleasure having you.
It was a pleasure to be with you and give you a little insight into our work. Thank you.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you so much.